This is something we've been looking forward to doing for a while, a special non-episode of the Wild and Crazy Guys podcast. This week, we're going to talk about our favorite political moments and kind of break down the political presidential history of SNL.
Now, our fans who've been with us since years ago, they will know that we did something like this on our previous podcast, but I don't think any recording that exists. Let's just do it again.
We're going back to the start, back to basics.
Absolutely. And so the election is now, we think, behind us, and we're going to be having a new president in January, which we have seen. Obviously, Joe Biden been portrayed for years and years now, but he'll enter the ranks soon of a SNL president. Now, we assume Jim Carrey is going to carry that mantle through at least 2021, but time will tell if they pivot into different directions with that, and how long will Jim Carrey want to do this. So time will tell there, but we're going to look backwards now at kind of the history of this show and its foray into politics, and kind of how it's evolved quite a bit, definitely in our lifetime, but for sure since the beginning of the show. So as we dive right into the backgrounds of kind of where this all began, and it began with Chevy Chase playing Gerald Ford.
Couldn't stay on his feet. Poor guy couldn't stay on his feet.
So I guess we can dive right in. Maybe this notion of like the what makes a good presidential impersonator here, because Chevy Chase, they made no attempt to make him look like Gerald Ford. They made no attempt to have him sound like Gerald Ford. Yet he played Gerald Ford on that show, and stumbling around, kind of confused, perplexed, all because Ford really had one fall down the stairs off of Air Force One. It kind of took on a life of its own. And so, like, this notion of what is a good impersonation, I think is a good question that we can lead off with here, because we have Gerald Ford terribly impersonated by Chevy Chase, or we also have, perhaps more recently, I think Jay Farrell playing Obama was almost too good of an impersonation.
Yeah, I would say that Jay Farrell had the impersonation down. I don't know that he really had the character down. Before we went on the air here, you had kind of brought this up, and I said I had the perfect answer. I thought two actors were really pretty well known for playing Bill Clinton. Phil Hartman started out, and then Daryl Hammond. And Phil Hartman was more of a he had some of the voice down, but he was much more of a caricature of who Bill Clinton was, whereas I thought Daryl Hammond really nailed both. He had the voice and he had the personality. Now, later on, we'll go through rankings, so I'm not going to give any spoilers on how I feel about that. But I think it's really interesting, because I think if you asked 100 people, 50 of them would say they preferred Hartman, and 50 of them would say they preferred Hammond. So I think it's just in how the audience wants to look at it.
And it's also like thinking, like in movies, like biopics, do you want the actor to become the person to a T, or do you want them to have their own spin on it, which I think is always a fascinating thing. And in comedy, I think you have a little bit more, that gap can be wider and it still can work. It's kind of an interesting thing over the years of how that has played out, how we have sort of perceived, yes, the president to be. And I think, there's been so many good ones over the years, but like this notion of like what makes someone better at it, it is this combination of the two things. You have to become the person, but put your own comedic spin on it. I don't really think I think the Chevy Chase and Gerald Ford model is dead. That I don't think we'll see that again, of having a person be that bad. But maybe.
I would offer that maybe of no fault of his own, Jim Carrey is he has knocked on the door of that a couple times by not even really impersonating Joe Biden, just kind of doing Jim Carrey things.
Yeah, but even like the makeup and the hair, like Chevy Chase had a full head of his hair, and
now even you're right. I mean, as far as appearance went, it wasn't even close.
And then going forward, I think that what Dan Aykroyd played Jimmy Carter, and he had a mustache when he played Jimmy Carter. Mm-hmm. which was going out of their way to make him look different, which was, maybe at the time that was considered to be kind of funny and avant-garde, but I think nowadays we wouldn't see anything like that. At least they try to sustain some element of realism.
I don't think we won't see that again.
No. Now we got our first trivia question today, brought to you by Squarespace. Build
Squarespace.
build the top notch website for your business using Squarespace.
Did we lose stamps.com already?
Well, there's two trivia questions today actually, so we got some extra sponsorship money, totaling $0.00 coming in here. But Squarespace to build the best website for your online business. And the question first off here is, what presidents had the most different people portray them while they were the president? So for example, like it has to be while they were president. So utilizing, say, if someone played Bill Clinton in 2004, that wouldn't count. So who had the most different people play them during their term in office?
All right, now I'm kind of going through my list here. The only Ronald Reagan I remember is Phil Hartman. The only HW I remember is Dana Carvey. As I mentioned before, I remember two Bill Clintons. I remember two W's with Will Ferrell and Chris Parnell, and I remember, I think, three Obamas. So I'm going to say Barack Obama is going to be my pick.
Okay, I think we'll chalk it up to age here, but it was in fact Ronald Reagan.
Oh.
Let me run down the list of Ronald Reagan impersonators. Harry Shearer played him in 1980, but also in 1984. A guy named Charles Rocket.
Charles Rocket. He was a one season wonder. The poor guy passed away of his own hand after that season. He shared the season with Gilbert Gottfried.
There you go. He played Ronald Reagan. Also, then Joe Piscopo had a stretch as Reagan. Randy Quaid played him for a season. And then Robin Williams I'm guessing as a host or part-time guest there. And then, of course, as you mentioned, Phil Hartman rounded things out as Reagan left the White House. So kind of a melange of people there playing that one. But again, probably our age was a contributing factor to that. Now, doing some past research, I did see some past presidents before the office, before the show was created, and I noticed our good friend Tim Kazurinsky played Franklin Roosevelt in 1982.
Now we did coming up in a couple weeks here, we'll talk about Tim Kazurinsky and how he is our very good friend.
Absolutely. My favorite one on this list, though, is Rachel Dratch playing James Madison in 2000.
Any context on that?
No, I'm gonna give no context. I may look it up later, but maybe our Patreon subscribers can get info on what context Rachel Dratch played author of the Constitution, James Madison.
I mean, I know she was versatile. I didn't know she was that versatile.
I'm guessing maybe some sketch about Boston with Jimmy Fallon and Tina Fey and something to that effect. But we'll look into that.
That makes sense.
So are we ready to jump into our conversations of our lists here? We got some lists.
Absolutely.
We got some lists here, and we decided to do two non-presidents, our favorites, not necessarily the best, but our favorite, and then three presidents. I think both of us cheated and added some honorable mentions to our list. So, do you want to do non-presidents first?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Why don't you lead off here?
All right. So my number two. Okay. My number two favorite non-president was our good friend Norm Macdonald playing Bob Dole. Boy, did I love it! And that real world sketch will never get old to me. That's Bob Dole's peanut butter.
I'm gonna just jump the gun here and say he's my number two as well. I think we have the same number one, but we have not shared lists. We have not shared lists. It's important to note.
I don't know if we're going to have the same number one, but I'm sure that our honorable mentions are going to match up. But I'm not surprised to hear Bob Dole is your number two.
And to me, it's always a sign that the impersonation was good, and or the person impersonating has a good sense of humor. Because Bob Dole came on the show and played off of Norm Macdonald playing him. Norm even had the pen thing down with his hand. It was an over-the-top caricature, but it just worked so well.
A fun fact for you, that was the 1996 presidential election. And The following year, when I was in 7th grade for Halloween, I went as Bob Dole because of Norm's impersonation. And when my friends and I went trick or treating, the fine parents of the houses would open the door and they'd say, "And who are you?" And I would say, "Give Bob Dole some candy," and they would love it. It was a big hit.
That's great. That's fantastic. You love to see that. And I think The Simpsons had Bob Dole on some one of their Halloween episodes or something, and the Bob Dole on that episode of Simpsons was basically someone playing Norm Macdonald playing Bob Dole. It's kind of what it boiled down to. That's how you know when the impersonation has legs, when people use that as the basis for their impersonations of it.
And hold that thought, because you might hear it on another list in a little bit.
Absolutely. All right, do you want me to go first?
What's
Go
that?
ahead. Go ahead. Number one.
My number one non-presidential political figure is Will Ferrell portraying the Attorney General of the United States, Janet Reno.
See, we have the same one. We have the same one there.
Wow.
And I'm not that surprised. I think we talked about this before, our love of Will Ferrell playing Janet Reno. And like Bob Dole, Janet Reno came on. And to me, this was the ultimate aspect of just what a good sport. I mean, what a good sport she was to come on the show and to do it and to play along with it. I thought it was just great.
Rudy Giuliani, who's back in the news, once asked Will Ferrell as Janet Reno, "You fights dirty," and Janet Reno responded, "Then how comes my conscience is so clean?" Well, there it is.
Good one. This is
Gone.
From the Janet Reno Dance Party on MTV, a very short-lived but successful show on MTV in which they played they had a dance party in, I think it was her basement, is what it was.
She got to talk to there was a segment called Janet Reno Talks to Teens.
Yeah, no, it was a great bit. It was a great idea. I mean, I don't know how many attorney generals people can name from the past, but maybe more recently they can. But Will Ferrell as Janet Reno made that character really larger than life.
Yeah, I absolutely. And now I do have 3 honorable mentions.
Oh wow, 3. Okay.
I hope that's not too many, but I hope that's okay.
Go ahead. You go first. I only got 1.
All right. Now we're back to Will Ferrell playing only in one sketch, one time in a British Parliament sketch, playing Mr. Michael Shersby, who just wants to know what the Prime Minister plans on doing should Liam Gallagher leave Oasis. It's one of my absolute favorite sketches of all time, and it gets an honorable mention for me because I could watch that sketch every day and it would still make me laugh.
I didn't know we were leaving. I don't know we were crossing the ponds here for this, but I respect your choice. And to be honest, like Mike Myers playing the Prime Minister, I thought was pretty darn good too. That sketch worked on a lot of levels. But Will Ferrell playing the I don't know how to say it, a very effeminate member of Parliament was nonstop laughter. And I think we were both in our teams at that point in time, so it was playing to the right crowd.
Oh yeah. Secondly, this is kind of a deep cut, but I think it's going to go right after your heart. Mark McKinney playing Mark Russell, the political musical satirist who would play the piano songs and sing about politics. That was always a big hit sketch with me too.
Now, the best thing about him is that the SNL parody songs are almost more realistic sounding than the actual songs that he sung on his real albums and his real PBS specials. Just a terrible like concept that he sings these songs about the government, but worse is that people laugh at it.
He had a red, white, and blue piano, and it was on PBS, and it was written for Saturday Night Live.
It almost was. It almost seems like it should have been just a sketch that someone turned into a career, not the other way around.
And finally, my final honorable mention, which will hit both of us right in the heart, the only of the political figures that you and I have had the pleasure of meeting, and of course, we could never go through an episode without talking about Kenan Thompson. Jimmy McMillan, The Rent is Too Damn High. That's beautiful. Wonderful. So that also gets that gets an honorable mention from me, and I can tell the viewers at home that when you and I and our friend Anthony were in DC, we actually ran into Jimmy McMillan, and I don't think I've ever seen you so happy.
So when I remember first seeing that this video of Jim McMillan and his debates going online, and the first thought was, this is Kenan Thompson. I mean, it was just tailor-made, and sure enough, they gave him the treatment. And then, yeah, we were in D.C. just walking. You turn a corner, and D.C. is one of those weird cities that, like, you never expect to see anyone famous, but, like, it's always kind of in the possibility that you might turn a corner and just see, like, some figure from the news. Now, you seldom do, but we did. And we saw Jimmy was packing up his truck or his car, and he had his rent is too damn high message, and it was kind of a special moment. But that's a good deep pull, and he was a candidate for mayor and governor, I believe, of New York. So I think he is in the politics realm.
And the day we saw him, he let us know that he'd be endorsing Hillary Clinton for the presidential election.
Now I thought about that. Like that was in 2014, and we were there, I believe, which means that the election was still over 2 years away. So I think we all knew Hillary Clinton was running for president, but it seemed a bit early for Jimmy McMillan to be hop on that train, but he was there.
Jimmy knew what he wanted. So
my honorable mention is kind of a deep pull here. And it's part of my age and part of my exposure into SNL. I just remember very vividly the 92 election. So much. I was 11. I was kind of starting to figure out the show and figuring out like the world and who was who, what was what. And of course, like many, I enjoyed Ross Perot. But what I more enjoyed was his vice presidential candidate, Vice Admiral James Stockdale, played by Phil Hartman. And basically they played him as this giant buffoon. And 11-year-old me just thought it was the funniest thing ever that this guy was so like, kind of like out of it and lost. And it made me laugh. And so I always stick to that one because A, it was Phil Hartman, and B, was just the timing of my life when this happened was just like, it was perfect for me.
Phil Hartman could do no wrong. He could do no wrong.
Have you seen those old sketches with Stockdale? And
yeah.
Okay. That to me it wasn't, I don't even know if it's a good impersonation. I don't know if I've ever seen James Stockdale talk before. But at the same time, it just, something about it always sticks with me. I'll always know James Stockdale was a VP candidate for Ross Perot because of Phil Hartman.
And it speaks to our love of the politics on SNL that we were asked to come up with a list of 4 total, and we got 7. So there's a lot of good talent out there.
Absolutely. So let's now foray into the presidency. And I think we'll have probably some crossover here. Do you want to go backwards for this one?
Yeah. So number 3.
Yeah, we'll do honorable mentions first.
Oh, I don't have any honorable mentions on this one.
Okay. I'm going to do my honorable mention is Jay Farrell playing Obama because it wasn't that funny, but it just was so darn good. And I'm still kind of like perplexed why Jay Farrell got the hook when he did, because Obama still had, I think, a year left as president. And maybe it's because the impersonation wasn't all that funny. It was just he had the cadence, he had the voice, he had the mannerisms. It just wasn't funny.
Yeah, it was a perfect impression. It just the humor never fell, and I believe he was replaced by Fred Armisen.
I think Armisen did it first, and then maybe did it after at the end. Okay, wrote it out there. I mean, who would do it today? Would Chris Redd be it had to be Chris Redd, right? Or I don't know if I can recall Obama making.
I think it would have to be Chris Redd, unless they brought in an outside person like they have for Trump and Biden.
I don't know. I'll look into who it's been since then. Now this brings us to our trivia question brought to you by Stamps.com. Get all of your stamp and postage needs at Stamps.com to avoid the post office. For all your mailing and postage needs, use comment code NORM.
Say what? The holidays come, you need to use that code.
You don't want to go to the post office right now. You don't need that. Just use Stamps.com. Now, Obama, as a candidate, appeared on SNL, as many other presidents did, but only one president appeared while they were in office. Who was the only president to appear on the show while they were the presidents of the United States? I'll give you a hint. Do you want a hint or no?
Well, give me the hint. Sure.
They did say, they were the one to say, live from New York, it's Saturday night. I don't know if it's a hint or not, but it's a fact.
I now you're going to have to correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember a video conversation between Dana Carvey and George H.W. Bush live on the show. I don't recall if H.W. was still in office, but that's going to be my pick, George H.W. Bush.
Incorrect. It was Gerald Ford.
Wow.
Who did it in? Let me get the date on this. It was obviously very early on the show. It was the summer of '76, or it was 1976, April of '76. So when he was in the midst of the election, I guess. He appeared April 17th, 1976, and he's the one who said live from New York, it's Saturday night.
Now, do you recall the H.W. Dana Carvey conversation?
I do.
It must have been after he left office.
Yeah, it was. I think it was like '94, I believe. So maybe when Dana Carvey came back to host or something, because it was definitely after the presidency. It was October 22nd, 1994.
Okay.
In which it happened. Yeah. Yeah. So obviously President Trump has been on the show before he was president. Obama came on when he was a candidate in '07. Bill Clinton never appeared on the show. H.W. Bush did. Ronald Reagan did not. And Ford didn't. Ford did, and Carter did not, I believe. So that was the Stamps.com trivia question.
I went 0 for 2 today.
That's okay. It was tough. It was tough ones there. Now, maybe part of Ford's reasoning was he wanted to sort of make himself seem likable in the same way that Richard Nixon, did on Laugh-In. He appeared on Laugh-In.
Talk it to me.
Talk it to me. That was before SNL was on, so maybe Nixon had he had the opportunity, he would have appeared on the show as president, but sadly he did not. So number 3, do you want to go first?
Sure. Number 3, I guess it's kind of a twofer because I'm picking Phil Hartman as both Ronald Reagan and Bill Clinton. If I'm being forced to pick one, I'm picking Bill Clinton. But my mind always goes back to the Phil Hartman as Ronald Reagan sketch, where he has to meet the Girl Scout of the year, and he has his whole cabinet hiding, and then they're planning attacks for the Cold War and such. It's just such a well done sketch that my mind always goes there when I think of Phil Hartman as Reagan. When I think of Phil Hartman as Clinton, if you don't think of the McDonald's sketch when he's eating the food and talking about warlords, I don't know what to tell you. You're missing out.
Yeah. Now, I vaguely remember a sketch later on in Reagan's, after he was president, about kind of poking fun at the Alzheimer's. I remember that was all that. I remember that getting some publicity, but I don't remember much about Phil Hartman playing Reagan outright.
I'll send you a link to the sketch because it's outstanding.
I think I remember seeing that one, reference that one, but personally, I had no recollection of it happening. But I'm with you, number 3. My number 3 is Bill Clinton, played by Phil Hartman. Basically because of the McDonald's sketch, just the warlords and with the food, and it just worked on so many levels. To me, Darrell Hammond, Bill Clinton was, a bit more of the caricature, kind of like philandering womanizer one, which maybe in hindsight was probably better off or better, more spot on. But to me, the Phil Hartman one was just so good.
Yeah. Number 2 for me, we go back to Will Ferrell playing George W. Bush. I think for 2 reasons. One, because of my age at the time, it was late high school into college. But 2, when W first took office, obviously September 11th was a big deal. The country kind of needed some laughs, and he really made W appear, kind of approachable and fun and in charge. Whether or not you agreed with his politics, Will Ferrell made him seem like just kind of a fun guy who was going to be doing his job. And I thought in some ways that kind of comedy was very reassuring. Right after September 11th, when he was naming the axis of evil and he was just throwing people into the axis of evil. Just a great sketch and a good way to kind of lighten the mood around the United States at the time. So Will Ferrell as as George W. Bush, number 2 for me.
Yeah, before we move on to mine here, I'm just going to refer back to Clinton one more time. I remember 96, in which I'm pretty sure was still Phil Hartman doing it. There was debate between Norm Macdonald playing Bob Dole and Bill Clinton, and Bob Dole lists all these things of Clinton's not doing well and how I'll do better at this and so forth and so on. And then Phil Hartman just turns and says, "But I'm still going to win." And that was kind of the moment of like, how am I losing to this guy? Kind of this like tagline from that election. So, you know what? Do your number one. I have a feeling we just crisscrossed our 1 and our 2.
Okay.
So do your number 1, and then I'm pretty sure your 1 is my 2 and my 2 is your 1. But go ahead.
My number 1 is absolutely 100%, no question, Dana Carvey playing George H.W. Bush. Some of, to your earlier point about being 11 and Admiral Stockdale, I was, by the time George H.W. Bush left, I was about 8 or 9 and really trying to start to figure out Saturday Night Live a little bit. And I had older cousins who would say things like, "Wouldn't be prudent at this juncture." And those just kind of became really funny catchphrases and things like that. So really my first memory of the presidency on SNL would be Dana Carvey. And so that's number 1 for me.
So my number 2 was George H.W. Bush, played by Dana Carvey, because it was so good. It was so good at the point where if you asked Americans, name a quote from George H.W. Bush, I bet about 10 Americans that named a quote would probably mention a quote of "not going to do it" or "wouldn't be prudent." They might mention "read my lips, no new taxes." Otherwise, 1,000 points of light maybe. Otherwise, it's like pretty much every quote from H.W. Bush is probably going to be what Dana Carvey said on the show. And that to me is a good legacy of that piece. And also, like, it becomes the point where every impersonation of George H.W. Bush is based off of Dana Carvey's impersonation of George H.W. Bush.
I think that, you and I used to listen to the Norm Macdonald podcast all the time when it was on, and there was a great interview with Rich Little way back. And Rich Little was really well known for doing a Johnny Carson impersonation. And he said, after that, every impersonation of Johnny Carson was simply an impersonation of Rich Little impersonating Johnny Carson. And to your point, every impersonation of George H.W. Bush is simply Dana Carvey impersonating H.W. Bush.
And then my number 1 is Will Ferrell playing W. I mean, it's splitting hairs between the Dana Carvey and Will Ferrell playing the respective Bushes. But to me, something about the Will Ferrell piece it had that perfect balance of realistic yet funny. And same thing with H.W. Bush. I bet if you ask someone to say what's a word that George Bush said in office, you'd probably say strategery, right? Or some other ism that he just had the cadence down perfectly. Even a couple of years ago, when like he did a speech on behalf of like Republicans, kind of condemning Trump, even that was just hilarious. Like George Bush has been out of a lot of public realm now for 10 years, and it still just worked. It still was spot on. It still seemed realistic. It just still seemed so good, and I thought it was just a perfect impersonation. Will Ferrell just owned it.
And I think it's another feather in the cap of SNL because after George W. Bush left office, Will Ferrell went on to Broadway to do a one-man show as George W. Bush, which ended up on TV. I think it made him on HBO. And it simply didn't work as well as a 6 or 7 minute sketch. The 1 hour sketch simply did not play as well as the 6 or 7 minute home run. And I think that is really a good way of looking at the political landscape on SNL. Too much of a good thing can be bad.
Absolutely. And looking at, who others have played him, Sudeikis, Forte, Daryl Hammond, Chris Parnell, they just didn't, it was a whole different environment when it was Will Ferrell. But like in the 2 or 3 minute bits, it was just so perfect. Now, in doing a little bit of looking back on things, I looked back at the last couple of elections. Obviously, 16, we had the Chappelle hosting. Then prior to that, in 2012, Anne Hathaway was the host, and very little reference into politics. 2008, they didn't even have an episode about after the election. So, I mean, obviously schedules can be fluid, but there was no. I mean, I think this phenomenon of making politics more a central part of the show is more of a newer phenomenon. Obviously, it's always happened, but it seems more they're more invested in it lately because it's more part of our pop culture now.
I would also offer that the last two elections, this 2020 election and the 2016 election, much more hotly contested than certainly 2012 or 2008.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and then more of the you can call it the Trump effect or maybe the social media effect, but more in tune with that. And now that the election is likely behind us, we're not going to see the show come back again till we think probably the earliest would be we settled on the 5th, I believe, was the earliest to come back. Who knows where things will be in a couple of weeks, but probably I would lend to think not much going on in terms of politics in the next few episodes. But eager to see how things shake out now. What does Alec Baldwin do? Where does the Jim Carrey piece go with it? I mean, politics aren't going anywhere in the show. I'm also curious if they'll ever go back to having, or is this new thing of like cameos of like famous non-cast members coming back to play these top tier figures? If that's just going to be the new norm, or if it'll just be passing fad, I don't know.
I wonder myself because I did think, we talked about this last week. I always thought it was a very big honor for a cast member to be allowed to play the president. So I'd kind of like to see it go back that way. But Alec Baldwin had some huge success, so they may stick with what they've got.
Well, I think it was a bit. Seth Meyers was, he on the night of the election 8 years ago, he texted. I think did Sudeikis play Mitt Romney, or was that
Will Forte?
Will Forte, or whatever it was. I mean, basically, when Mitt Romney lost, Seth Meyers texted and said, "Sorry if you're lost," because like you're right, being the president does allow you to have this like this free path to becoming like famous and becoming well known because you're the central figure in the show. It was
you're signing a 4-year contract to be on Saturday Night Live,
unless you're Jay Farrell,
right?
Which that still perplexes me, but yeah, so it was today. But like, yeah, losing when you become the president, yeah, you're guaranteed, or in theory, like this consistent spot for 4 years time, and it is a big deal. But yeah, so the last two presidents now will have been kind of ringers brought in to play them, at least to some degree. But we'll see what happens with Biden going forward. And as this election ends, the next one kind of has already begun. So we'll see how they start to tease that out over the next 4 years. But 4 years is a long time.
Indeed, and a lot can happen. But I think I think we haven't seen the last of Alec Baldwin, and we haven't seen the last of Jim Carrey for sure.
Well, I think when looking at as he fades out, as the term ends, as we get closer to the inauguration, I think then we'll start to see another Baldwin bit. But after January 20th, I mean, maybe occasionally just as a punching bag type thing to bring him on, but otherwise I don't see much use for that. And I'm sure Alec Baldwin, I think we both talked about how he was probably hoping he would lose 4 years ago for various reasons, but one of which is that he didn't want to keep coming back to keep doing this.
Right.
And then he kind of got roped into it. And at that point in time, there was kind of no going back.
Just as a closing here, we shouldn't ignore the amazing job that Kate McKinnon has done with some political figures as well, because she really has done a great job, not only with Hillary Clinton, but with so many others. So just want to throw that out there too, because she's been fantastic.
Well, Amy Poehler kind of like owned that corner for a long time with Hillary Clinton, and you thought, who could do better than this? And then Kate McKinnon comes out and does better than that. So a pretty remarkable stretch for Hillary Clinton this century of being played very well on the show.
Definitely.
Now, I guess we also maybe it's on her doing this too. The Tina Fey Sarah Palin was iconic for so many reasons. Once you saw Sarah Palin the first time, you knew this has to be Tina Fey.
Yep.
And it was so good. It became the whole like I can see Russia from my house, being the moment. But that became kind of defined her.
So, and I think that's one of the some people point to that as kind of a difference maker in that election, the Tina Fey Sarah Palin impersonation. So certainly that may also play into why SNL has taken such a stand on politics.
Yeah, I hope that didn't make it didn't make up anyone's mind, but we should probably seen worse things sway people's minds on this kind of stuff. Um, and also maybe as a side note here too, I know there's been some in the past like conversations about like someone Horatio Sands has criticized the show for being too left and the writers' room being too far left. And I think it was Robert Downey or not Downey who said that he kind of criticized sometimes some of the things they couldn't do. That'd be a fascinating angle to play. I don't want to speculate because we don't know the insides of it, but like how much of that gets into the writing, how much that comes from Lauren, how much that comes from NBC, how much that comes from Comcast of like, hey, you guys can't touch this kind of thing. I'd be intrigued to know more about that.
Well, I mean, we do know that one of the reasons Norm got in all sorts of trouble when he was doing Weekend Update was doing too many OJ jokes because there was some friendships there in NBC. So it's a great question. There's probably a lot going on behind the scenes as far as what's available and what's allowed that we don't even know about.
So we got the next week. We got it's the weekend before Thanksgiving. Are we gonna do a holiday themed show, or what's our plan coming up? Are we gonna
let's do a holiday themed show? And then the week after that, if there's no episode, I say we take the viewers with us to the SNL Christmas party.
Well, I think we do that for after Thanksgiving because I think we don't know yet about the 5th of December if that'll be a new episode or not. And we'll make that the tentative plan.
Next week will be a holiday themed episode. Great, there it is. That's it. Well, this has been great. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. And say good night, folks.
Good night, Joe.